Will diversity be an issue or an opportunity in 2025? Diversity for me means all sorts of things, and actually what I'm not going to do tonight is stand here and talk to you about gender diversity in the corporate world. Diversity is about so much more than that. Diversity, whether we're talking about it from a company perspective or from just the success of our society as a whole, is about diversity of culture, of course diversity of gender, but actually it's about diversity of experience, of aspiration. It's about diversity of thinking and lateral thinking to ensure that ultimately we unlock the best in any situation that we are in. And I thought we'd start by just thinking about where we came from, and apologies to the great number of men actually that we see in the audience here this evening. Ultimately, diversity for me is about unlocking the talent in a team. It's about talent management, and it's about getting the best answer. Now, I'd like to think that actually everything is not quite at a point where we just all need to recamp and go back into our caves. What I'm assured is that the German terminology, and I'm not fluent in German, says something along the lines of, and we're not finished yet. Either that or someone's playing a huge joke on me and I'm saying something very rude to you right now, for which I apologise if that's the case. And it's great to see a woman at the front leading the charge. But in fact, to be really successful, we need a team of people with different skills, different experience, different attitudes, different risk profiles leading the charge, because that's how we get the best answer. In the corporate world, we've tended to think about diversity in quite a blunt way because we like to measure things. So we tend to think about what can we actually demonstrate, what's the metrics that we can use to chart our success. And that's really what we've seen when we look at the media, when we look at what's being discussed in the business sections of the FT and on the Today programme. The 25% target, which we know the government has put out for FTSE 100 companies, 25% of women on boards. You can measure that. That's success. The 30% Club, which is a club which is made up of a number of organisations, including my own, KPMG, and many other professional services and law firms as well. The aspiration being that we want 30% of women, 30% of our partnership to be female. Now, I have to stand here today and say to you that in KPMG, only 14% of women in the UK are partners. The partnership is only 14% women. Bizarrely, the lawyers were congratulating me on that. Because in professional services, you have, as a woman, a 1 in 4 chance of becoming a partner. In law firms, if you join today and you're a woman, you have a 1 in 10 chance of becoming a partner. Now, that's pretty woeful when we look at the fact that basically all firms recruit about 50-50. And in fact, many actually recruit slightly higher percentage of women. But all organisations, including our own, will absolutely believe that we are recruiting the best talent. So the challenge is, why, when by the time we get to partnership, have we failed to nurture and promote so much of that talent? Why have we lost it along the way? Unilever is one of the most enlightened organisations. Paul Polman is a hugely passionate man, hugely inspiring, understands the power of actually captivating his employees and his customers by talking about purpose and the difference that they make in the world. But Paul Polman and Unilever still believe that they can only get 55% of their senior management team as women, and that's an aspiration. So in the corporate world, we measure in a blunt way, and we need to start thinking about diversity differently. Of course, in common with many organisations, KPMG already has Generation Y in the workforce. And we know that what motivates Generation Y is fundamentally different than what may have motivated me when I started work. In the recruitments that we do, they are galvanised by what the organisation stands for. What do you do through your corporate responsibility? They want work-life blend. We don't talk about work-life balance anymore. And actually, they are really calling out what they don't like in our business. One of my fellow partners, a guy, was talking to a number of young graduates in his team a couple of years ago about their own career aspirations. And one of them said to him, you know, we don't really want to be partners because we look at the partnership and we see so many people who are divorced. That is not my aspiration in life. So, we're looking at 2025 and whether diversity will be an issue or an opportunity. And that doesn't sound very long away, does it? 2025. Let's just 12 years away. Let's take ourselves back 12 years and think what the world was like. This was me. Fortunately, the world's changed a little bit. I was a senior manager in KPMG in the audit practice, and I was looking after a portfolio of large charity audit clients. Sorry, actually, I just need to take a call. That was high technology in KPMG 12 years ago, perhaps a little poetic license. But it was a fundamentally different world. But I want to take you back 12 years. And actually, for some of you in the audience, 12 years ago was probably more than half your lifetime ago. Let me give you some context so that you can remember 12 years ago. Some of the biggest DVD favourites in my collection were from 12 years ago. The biggest box office films in that year were Bridget Jones's Diary, Moulin Rouge, the first Lord of the Rings film. From a technology perspective, Sony was just launching the Xbox. And in February, in 2001, iTunes was first launched to an unsuspecting public. Social media, of course, didn't even exist. No one had heard of YouTube or MySpace, which has been and gone. Certainly not Facebook. In fact, the biggest website in 2001 was Friends Reunited. You probably heard some of your parents talk about that. But it was a different world. And it was a different world working in KPMG 12 years ago. I used to spend a lot of time out at my charity clients, reviewing audit files. But I couldn't access my emails unless I was physically behind my laptop, because the BlackBerry had not even come into its full force at that point. So I would go home at night and plug in my modem, and it would chug away for 3.5 hours to download my emails, and then I'd look at them. But none of my clients expected a real-time response from me anyway, because they knew I couldn't look at my emails in real time. And certainly neither did my colleagues. That's 12 years ago. To put even more context, 20 years ago when I first started at KPMG, most people didn't even have a computer at all on their desks, unless they were a PA. If a client wanted you to look at some information and give an answer to something, they put it in the post to you. And then when it arrived, you'd have a look and you might give them a call or you might post it back. A very, very different world that we lived in. But taking us back to 12 years ago, one of the things that is still constant is I was still a woman back then. No, it doesn't really look like it. And I was still a woman working in a very male-dominated world. And actually, not that much has changed from that perspective. So, let's think about 2025 and what it might look like to kids entering the workplace at that point. We thought we might ask a 1-year-old. Have you seen this before? An iPad is a magazine that's broken. But of course, we can't ask 1-year-olds. So what we did is we went to City Hackney Academy, which we have a very special relationship with at KPMG, and we asked a class of 14-year-olds about their aspirations for work and what it meant for them. What did they want their work to be like? Now, I was actually quite shocked by some of the things that they said. What they said was that the most important thing for them when they think about their work in the future is that they want to make a lot of money. And they want a job that they can fit in with their social life. And they'd quite like to travel. But more than a quarter of them said they don't want any challenge at all in their job. The innocence of youth, hey? I wonder, the reason that shocked me is that that is quite different from what we see in Generation Y right now in KPMG and in business. But I wonder whether those 14-year-olds, and admittedly it's not a statistically representative sample, but perhaps they have been affected by what they see around them, what they recognise or what they perceive the workplace is like. This 24/7, people walking down the road looking at their smartphones or reading or on the phone to their clients. They have been born into a world where we fundamentally behave in a different way than I behaved when I was a child. My father's work never entered our house because it couldn't. There was no technology to enable it to. Whereas I actually am responsible for bringing a lot of work into my house, not because I have to, not because someone's going to come down on me if I don't, but because I like to be in control. I like to know what's in my inbox, so I'm constantly checking my emails so that I know what's there. Behaviour change, which actually potentially has negative connotations, not just in our own lives, but in what the future generations see and look into and think, I don't want that. We asked these 14-year-olds to think about certain words that we use a lot in business and tell us, what does that word mean to you? Career. And interestingly, these were the responses that they gave. Actually, that's probably how I would define a job. It's something that you do to live. It's a necessity. It's just what you do. For them, a career is something which is a kind of have-to-do thing. And I wonder whether that is being perpetuated by some of the careers advice that these students get in schools, because what is actually shocking is if you think about the pace of change and how the world's changed even dramatically in the last 12 years, careers advice in schools is fundamentally pretty much the same as when I was at school 30 years ago. Quick straw poll, who thinks they actually had good careers advice when they were at school? There you go. We also asked them what this word meant to them. Oh, sorry, this was a point that actually, this was completely out of my, because I watched Bridget Jones's Diary, I haven't watched the Hunger Games. But the point was that they saw a career as being in District 1 and 2, because that's the place to be. We asked them what this word meant to them. Talent. Now, this actually was really quite depressing, because all of them said, talent is something that you are born with and you do not have to work at. Pretty much. And actually, I did a quick sense check on this with my daughter, who's 10, yesterday. And she said, yep, talent, mummy, is something, everybody's got one, but some have better talents than others. This is what they actually said. But again, if you think about these kids, they're 14, what they have grown up in is a world where we celebrate programs like Britain's Got Talent. it's the fast forward, it's the instant success. It's not the kind of I have to work through this, I have to get better. In business, we talk about talent management. We talk about talent programs and talented people. What we're really meaning is that we are taking people who have potential and we are helping them to unlock that and fulfill that in the best way that they can. This generation think talent is your ticket to the top and your fast, easy ticket to the top. We asked them what this word meant. Success. And interestingly, again, a lot of it came back to money. A lot of it came back to maybe there's something that we should be doing differently with this generation to challenge that assumption. Now again, it's not statistical. We have to think about the fact that we're talking about a small group of kids who go to an inner city academy. And actually when I talked to my daughter, she told me she wanted to, her idea of success was to work with animals because she loves them. But, you know, fundamentally, we cannot ignore what these kids have said. And it made me think about school reports. What do we actually measure and value and reward in school reports? Because again, my daughter's school report is fundamentally the same as when I was at school. I get comments around the fact that she worked hard on her project on Rome, or that she's learning great skills in hockey. What we do not do is we do not actually overtly comment on, reward and nurture behaviours which are really important, not just in life, but in business. Skills such as problem solving, analytical skills, skills around potentially negotiation, skills around forming alliances, hugely, hugely powerful stuff in today's world. We don't talk to kids in those terms. We talk to them in terms of activities and subjects. So maybe that's where there is a disconnect in terms of what we're rewarding and what we're nurturing. But what we do is we have this absolute focus on success, and you actually celebrate when you achieve success. You don't celebrate the inputs along the way and the hard work along the way. And I think maybe we can think about, you can bring this to life by thinking about the Olympics. How many of you last year watched Mo Farah in the final? And how many watched Mo Farah in all of the heats? Very good. Well done, Dot. And how many actually charted Mo Farah's career and watched him in his career as he approached the 4 years up to the Olympics? Because we don't celebrate that. We don't see that as interesting. We want to celebrate the success. We're not interested in the journey along the way. We ask the students, will it be necessary for you to work in an office in the future? Will you have to physically go to an office to work? A resounding no. And of course that's true. We don't have to go to the office today to work. But we ask them to say, okay, we ask them to articulate to us, okay, what will your office, what will your workspace look like then if you're not physically going to an office? Hectic. But actually they talked a lot about working in the cloud. They talked a lot about this sort of virtual interaction which they expect to have with one another. And I think that that's quite interesting because we know that fundamentally we have evolved over thousands of years, if not millions of years. And we're human, and we need human contact. And whether technology in practical terms allows us to do our job, the question for me is, does it allow us to do our job in the best way possible and in the most fulfilling way possible? You'll have seen the recent headlines that there have been around Marissa Mayer, CEO of Yahoo, banning home working. This is what some of the kids who are concerned about not going to an office made the point that, well, I might just be lazy, or I might just be distracted. And maybe that's what people are kind of hearing Marissa Meyer say, well, I don't trust you. I need you to get into this office so I can see that you're pulling your weight. Or maybe there's something a bit more fundamental here. Maybe what she's really trying to say, and I have a lot of sympathy with this, is without regular human interaction, the organisation is never going to be the best. That empathy, that idea that spawns across the water cooler conversation, the fact that if you're trying to deal with somebody who's underperforming or is causing a problem in a team, you can't do that unless you can sit down and have a real conversation with them face to face, which is based on an authentic understanding of who they are. So yes, technology has changed dramatically and will continue to change. But we've taken a long time to evolve to where we are, and we're going to have some difficult things to navigate through along the way. We asked the kids, the students, to say, okay, what does technology look like that you will now, that you will in the future use in your day-to-day lives? Or what do you even see right now that you might be using quite soon? Google Glasses came up a lot. And of course, robots and how they might help around the house or in the office. But quite sadly, they also said this. And that's true. Many of the jobs that we do today will not be needed in the future. There are already companies using robots to care for people in their own homes. So we need to think about that. And I go back to my point about careers advice and what we're nurturing in schools. You know, there's a disconnect. It's potentially out-of-date thinking. So we've looked a little bit at today and where we are. What does tomorrow hold for us? Of course, there's no real answers. Linda Gratton has talked a lot about the future of work. And what she says really resonates with me. She says that in the future, people will do jobs that they are fundamentally passionate about, and they will only do jobs that they are passionate about. She says that the driver for work will be not just going to work for money, to buy consumer goods, to satisfy our own demands. It will be about going to work to build, for meaning, for it to be meaning in our own lives. And she also talks about the fact that the business world is changing fundamentally. The old relationships of competition are changing. There will be more and more organisations working collaboratively together in alliances. And that may mean a very different working pattern as well for people in employment. And I get that, but those 14-year-olds didn't seem to get that. They're saying something which is really different. And I think it's partly because, if you think about the last 5 years, they have grown up in a country which is fundamentally in a lot of trouble, and a world that's in a lot of trouble. They look up and they see students at university and graduating out of university, students who feel the contract has been broken. I've gone to university, I've worked hard, I've studied, I've got my degree, I've got my student debt, I come out, there's no job for me. These kids see a world where 10,000 people apply for a job at Costa Coffee. So they're sort of recamping. They're going back to, okay, I need to be in control, and actually money is how I become in control. Now that's quite sad, and actually this is not a representative sample, but I think what it shows is there is massive diversity of thinking across the generations. I've talked about my generation and what I believe. You know, the students who are 14 are very different. Generation Y are very different from them in terms of what they tell us matters. My father, who's 70, I always say to him, you're the generation that broke our country. You're the guys that all retired at 50 and had 2/3 defined benefit non-contributory pensions and 0% mortgages and et cetera, et cetera. But really different diversity of thinking. And one of the challenges we will have in business is that we will be employing 4 or even 5 generations in a workforce. How do you possibly inspire a 22-year-old and a 75-year-old in the same way? You can't. How do you deal with the challenge that the graduates coming out of university are hugely resentful to those 70-year-olds who are effectively blocking the organisation by wanting to work longer and longer? It's really difficult, but it means we have to think in a different way, and we have to think about how we work and how we offer people work in a different way. Organisations will become more diverse, and some have already started. This is the robot who is used by the CEO of Evernote. And he uses this robot when he's out and about so that he can make his presence felt by the people in the office. It goes around and he can have a little WebEx with them, and he invites them to meetings and they can do presentations. But it's his way of making that human connection, but through a robot. Interesting. I think fundamentally there are three options here for business. Diversity has to be an opportunity. It cannot possibly be anything other than an opportunity, because we all know that diversity equals variety. If you look into a rugby team, you do not see 15 people who all look the same, who all think the same, who are all good at the same things. That's why they're a great team, apart from the England rugby team, of course. Diversity has got to be an opportunity. But what do we do about it? Because actually, going back to where I came in, corporates think about this in a really blunt way, through a narrow lens, through metrics that they can measure. Continuing to incrementally react to the fact that our clients are telling us we need to be more diverse, we need to represent and be relevant to the marketplace that they work in and we work in. Incremental approaches are not going to work. We do need to fundamentally change our approach to diversity. I don't talk about diversity in KPMG at all. I talk about talent. If you say, do you think we ought to be recruiting, nurturing and promoting the best talent, it is very difficult for somebody to say no. If I say, do you think we should be more diverse in terms of the people that we promote and start going into diversity metrics, that's when we start getting the rolling eyes and the shutting off. So we need to change it, but we need to frame it around talent. But fundamentally, we need to understand the rapid change that we live in. Potentially, in the last decade, we have seen more generation than we have ever seen before. It has changed the way we live our lives on a daily basis. It's changed the way we interact, it's changed what we value, and it's changed our expectations. We've seen that in the way that we as customers make decisions. Last week, Morrison's announced that they're in talks with Ocado because they know the fact that they cannot deliver groceries online is fundamentally losing the market share. They are becoming irrelevant as a supermarket. My expectations as a customer has changed. If I can't order it online and you can't deliver it to me, I'm not interested. That doesn't fit in with my life. I think we're going to see that around the employment contract. I think different generations with different values will demand different ways of working. And it will not all be driven by the corporates. It will not all be driven by the employers. It will be driven by the employees. People who want to work flexibly. People, and I don't just mean part-time working by that. I mean people who might want to be working in alliances with different organisations as opposed to being contracted to one organisation. We need to listen to what the generations are telling us. There is diversity, and diversity is the key, absolutely, to becoming the best. It is about survival of the fittest, and the winners in the corporate world will be the organisations that hear and see and nurture the diversity opportunity the most. Thank you.
How do you think can companies drive diversity? Because if I think of my company, we can employ people with different genders, we can employ multi-ethical employees, but then you have this mix of people, or mix of talent, as you would say it, in the company. But then how would you drive the benefits that you can actually take out of that?
Perhaps I can give some examples of what we do, and we certainly have not got all the answers in this, but one of the things that we need to get better at KPMG, but also I think business needs to get better at, is recognising the whole person that comes to work. And often, I think, in a business context, political correctness can stop that happening. So, you know, the fact that I'm a woman, or the fact that I'm black, or the fact that I'm Jewish, or whatever it might be, isn't necessarily overtly discussed. But actually, that's really important, potentially, in terms of understanding the psyche of my clients and who I'm trying to appeal to. We had a situation not very long ago in our Birmingham office for an advisory piece of work. And we sent the team out to do the pitch, or the team went out to do the pitch, and they came back, and the client phoned up and said, well, the target phoned up and said, you know, you were a great team. You told us a really great story, and you clearly have great skills, but you don't match who we are. You sent us 4 white, middle-aged men. And they didn't even consider the diversity angle. We have networks within our organisation. Aisha, who works with me, she's really involved in the Afro-Caribbean network, but we have sort of 12, 13 others. But for example, our Chinese network is really, really active in helping teams prepare for bids and pitches, because understanding the Chinese psyche and the culture and what will be important is really, and what will be important in the decision is fundamental. So I think for me, it's about bringing the whole person to work and being the whole person at work, and actually celebrating the difference, as opposed to try and ignore it because you think otherwise it might sort of cause some offence, or from the whole political correctness point of view. It's easier said than done, though.
Picking up your point about schools, and I do think there's problems there in what they teach, how they assess, and delivering what we need as employers. But then you also mentioned the point about our children looking at us and not wanting the careers that we've got. And absolutely, I have a 28-year-old daughter, a 20-year-old son, who said the one thing they knew was they didn't want a career like mine, which was being away for 24, 25 weekends a year. And I am really worried, because what is the future? If the schools are failing, the parents are failing, where are we going to end up? So are we going to have almost a doomsday scenario that we will not have students or young people who want to do the jobs we want them to do, who are so turned off? Is there some hope?
I'll try and offer a crumb of hope. Again, I suppose if I bring it back to my organisation and KPMG, I think in so many things that we do, we have to recognise that the people who are either at the top or have been in the organisation the longest have not necessarily got the answers that work for tomorrow, because our world, our psyche, our expectations, our values are fundamentally different. So I think there is hope, and of course there's hope, because I do think that we have to think about this in terms of opportunity as opposed to threat. But I think, you know, it's the brave organisation that actually says to the really young people coming through the door, you've got a big part to play in the answer, and we're going to hear your voice. And I think, you know, if you look at the organisations that have been really successful over the last 10 or 15 years, you look at the ideas that have taken off, and the millionaires that have been made along the way, and the hugely powerful companies that have shaped all of our lives, they've come out of the younger generation. You know, it's partly about the old corporate model being broken, and us embracing that rather than trying to rail against it.
Thanks for this enjoyable lecture. I just have a quick question on a similar line. Just on the theme of changing our approach to diversity, my question is, do you have a personal prediction on what the future work environment or organizational structure will look like? It's an open question.
It's a big question.
You don't have to answer.
Just a couple of observations from me. I think what I think we will see is, I think we will see the way that we embrace technology change a little bit, because I do think there has come a point where actually we are being controlled by technology. And certainly there is a piece around sort of, we don't feel we can say no to it. So I think there must come a point at which we sort of almost reframe how technology fits into our lives rather than just incrementally adding at each point. I mean, Facebook's an interesting example for me because through Facebook, people actually combine quite effectively their work and their personal life at the same time. I mean, if I think back to when I was first at KPMG, it was a massive no-no to do personal phone calls. You used to have to write a business case to get access to the internet. So I think there will be a reframing because there is a point that you do need to get the balance, not just between your work and your life, which is an artificial desire, but balance across all parts of your work. I do believe that human interaction is really important. And for me, it's as basic as looking at children. You can put a kid in front of an iPad or you can put them in front of a TV, but fundamentally we all crave that human interaction because that's how we learn. And that's sort of subconscious within us. So I do not believe that one day nobody will ever go to a place of work and work as part of a team. I think it's possible, but I think there will be enough people who will kind of opt out from that point of view. I think in terms of what we will look like and from a diverse perspective, I think sort of structure of organisations and career paths will be fundamentally different. And we've already seen that. People do not enter an organisation now expecting to work in a job for life. People already work for 7, 8, 9, 10 different employers during the course of their life. I think there will be a lot more about alliances, people coming together for certain projects, for certain tasks, and then disseminating and going to work with other things. I suppose one final comment from me would be that I think how we measure success and what we measure in terms of interest when we're looking to recruit someone will be very different. And Heather and I know a partner who has predicted for a long time that actually in the future the biggest factor that will be relevant in terms of recruitment will be how many contacts you have through Facebook as opposed to the references, or LinkedIn for example, as opposed to the references and the job credentials that you might have. So I think it'll be very different, but we're all human beings.
Thank you.
I looked through my contacts, I looked through my appointments for the next 2 weeks, and I recognized that someone said that I had one lunch that said VP, and I thought, oh, Vice President. I'm quite young, so I usually don't go for lunches with Vice Presidents. And then it said Vice President, Diversity. So this person is the Vice President of Diversity in her company. Do you feel that it is more a company culture, or do you think that most corporations should employ someone who is the Vice President of Diversity, and what is that job title even?
I think when we're successful, you won't ever have some... Actually, let me answer that in a slightly different way. So as part of my role, I am responsible for the diversity and inclusion success across KPMG. And last year, I went to a partners conference in Chicago, and I found myself sitting next to one of the minority people in the audience, which was another woman who was there. And we were chatting, and I was talking to her, and I was telling her what my job is, and she started laughing at me. And I said, well, why are you laughing? And she said, well, I come from Bulgaria. We have 9 partners in Bulgaria, and 5 of them are women. We don't understand why you guys talk about this diversity thing all the time. And it's because their culture has been women have always worked, and therefore women have always got on and been as successful in the corporate model. For me, a successful organisation is where you don't need a VP of diversity, or you don't need me purportedly driving an agenda on something, because it is just naturally there within the organisation. So I think you should go to lunch with them and challenge them how they're going to do themselves out of a job.
You're the second person today who's talked to me about Bulgaria and that area having exactly the thing. Everybody works, so what's the problem? So it's good to do some synchronicity.
A lot of cultural stuff.
Any more questions? Yes.
I've got a question. There's Anne-Marie Slaughter, who is a professor of public policy at Princeton, did an article fairly recently, I think in The Atlantic, called, I can't remember the title, but it was about can women still have it all, I think, and it was about, this is a gender question, it was about having kids and having a career, the balance. And I just wanted to know what you thought, whether you'd read or heard about it, and what you thought about the the kind of ongoing struggle for women when it comes to maternity and having kids, and how that impacts on their career progress?
I think until we work out a way that men can have kids, then it's always going to be a struggle. Can women have it all? Well, I think there is more opportunity for women to have it all. But actually, I think the thing which bugs me the most is when women say, oh, it's really easy and it's no problem and I'm this sort of superstar. But actually behind this, they're actually like a swan gliding along, but underneath they're struggling away and they're not actually raising up that struggle. The frustration for me in that is that actually other women are looking at it saying, how the hell does she do it? I'm in a complete state of meltdown here. It's not easy. And I think it comes back to this point about being able to be the real person that you want to be at work. You don't want to be labelled as the person who can't do that and can't do this and can't do that because you've always got to go and do the school run. But I think there is a little bit of a challenge that we need to put down to our male colleagues as well on this, because actually it isn't just women that have children. It's couples that have children. And, actually a lot of my, I know well of examples in my organisation where men will say, I've got to go and do something, but they won't overtly say, oh, it's because I've got to go to my kid's parents' evening, or it's because I've got to do the school pickup tonight, or whatever. Which means that because women are more naturally likely to raise this, it becomes the woman's problem. Can the women deal with it all? The reality is we all have a number of roles that we have to play. And I think it will. I think there's a slightly different angle here as well now that we're starting to see in across business, but also in our own organisation, where people are having to actually look after ageing parents, and it's almost the next taboo. That people are a little bit more comfortable talking about the fact that they've got to look after their kids, and the nursery shuts at 6 or whatever it might be. Talking about the fact that you've actually got to you have a responsibility to care for your ageing parent is becoming I think the next challenge, and I really, really hope that doesn't become the next problem for women to have to be sort of seen to be juggling to have it all. That actually men can support from that perspective and actually be honest at the same time. Nobody can easily have it all, but it's up to us to find the way that we can have what we want.
Can you ask a little bit about sort of rewarding success? Because I guess inspired by you talking about school reports and how we grade people, and also the Olympic, following people through the journey. Because one of the comments I heard from the Olympics, I forget exactly who it was, but was talking about the sort of the cheer of the crowds and, oh, I wish they could be here on an ice cold January morning when I'm training. So I guess if you think about athletes, they're very motivated and they kind of are able to envisage the reward for their success. Can you talk a little bit about how either you have done that in the workplace or how we can do that in the workplace to reward the sort of the good behaviours rather than necessarily the end result?
I think, if I'm honest, we haven't done it very well, because in the same way that I was critiquing the school report, our approach to performance management, and I'm saying ours in the sort of widest business sense, but equally in terms of KPMG's, our approach to performance management has been quite formulaic, where effectively what we are saying is, here is a set of competencies or skills, and we are going to measure you as an individual against each of those, as opposed to turning it on its head and saying, what are you really good at? What's your real skill in the team? And actually calling that out, which is very different. I think for me, it's actually sometimes about an organisation being confident enough actually to embrace perhaps some of the chaos that can come with that. The chaos that, I can't sort of stand my 11,000 employees in line and rank them along a spectrum. But I actually genuinely believe that if you are calling out what an individual is good at, building that self-belief, building that sense that, actually I am here because of something I've done as opposed to being in the right place or the right time, that's how you genuinely unlock real success in an organisation. But I think it also has to be recognised that is a hugely big investment that an organisation needs to make. And actually, you need to be really clear who is then managing, developing, nurturing those individuals. It can't be just something that somebody does, you know, at the end of their day job. Sorry.
You talked earlier about looking after charities audit. What do you think, you know, is happening within your clients' organisation as they're from the third sector? Do you find a difference?
In terms of diversity?
In terms of diversity?
I think there has been a difference, and I think it's a little bit akin to what we've seen in the public sector. That they you know, the third sector and the public sector had a better track record around gender diversity and around diversity at its broadest level in the past. And I think that's partly because, if I can talk about the charity sector specifically, I think it's partly because they have more of a culture where they are happy to embrace difference, where they are happy to be more flexible, where they are happy to actually look at that person from a holistic perspective as opposed to sort of from a job description that they do. However, I think what I've seen in the charity sector in the last sort of 3 or 4 years is that, in a sense, that had become business as normal for them. What the charity sector, and I'm vastly generalising here, but what the charity sector is now struggling with is itself rapid change that it has never had to deal with before. So whether that's a sort of a squeeze in statutory funding, a decline in voluntary giving, whatever it might be, they are having to deal with challenges that they have never had to deal with before. They've also got more and more people coming into the charity sector with sort of corporate backgrounds and corporate hats. So it's almost raised a different type of diversity challenge, that they've been diverse if you've looked at them from a physical perspective, but what we're now seeing is because the challenges are changing, they're struggling to change their own, I suppose, models of working to really embrace and unlock that.
Right, one last question, and then I think we need to break.
Do you think the current macroeconomic environment has any influence on the way workforce and corporate structure are changing worldwide? Because, for example, when Christine Lagarde was elected as IMF Managing Director in 2001, there was a lot of coverage about women getting elevated to such a high-profile post. And also in the last 5 years, we have seen that many women are appointed as state heads or prime ministers across the world. So what is your opinion on that?
It's a really interesting question. And I'm just going to throw it back a little bit into my world. But if you talk to a number of we have a restructuring division in KPMG that obviously deals with liquidations, companies in trouble, rapid appointments where you've got to make very, very difficult decisions around, you know, firing, distributing funds, etc., very quickly in very, very challenging situations. If you talk to a lot of our restructuring partners, they will say you cannot underestimate the power of a woman on the team in that situation because of the sort of emotional intelligence that they will bring into a very, very high stress, rapid response situation. Now, whether that parallels into what you're talking about and where we've seen the sort of rise of women, I don't know. I think, though, that what we have seen in terms of, you know, the credit crunch, the world economy, the crisis that we're seeing, what people do tend to do in that situation is kind of almost entrench back to what are the really important things that we value in our life. And I think that's why increasingly in business now we're hearing people talk about purpose and not just CSR but actual real corporate responsibility that's authentic. And there's a little piece of me that thinks that the sort of rise in the voice and the loudness of the voice around diversity has become more elevated. It's because people actually truly really believe it, but they sort of feel more comfortable talking about that now than maybe they would have done when times were booming and things were great and it was all about the bottom line.
Okay, thank you. thank you. I think our speaker probably deserves a drink after all of this. So I'd like to thank you all for coming to the business school tonight. I'd like to thank KPMG for enabling you all to come. But most importantly, I'd like to thank our speaker, who I think has given us some very, very acute observations about the world of work in the next decade, which have made it a very interesting and exciting place. I should be able to collecting my pension. People will be sticking pins in my ears. But I think you've made the future look fantastically interesting and many challenges for organisations. And I'd like, on all of our behalf, to thank you very, very much.